to be joined today by two industry experts who will help guide us through this discussion. And as Alyssa said, this is a safe space. This is an opportunity for you to ask those questions that you've been burning to ask, gain information and knowledge so you too can be involved in the discussion. So I encourage you to open your hearts, your minds to a dialogue that can only make us better. So let's get started. To open our discussion this afternoon and provide an overview of the fundamentals of DEI is our first panelist, Greg DeShields. Greg currently serves as the Executive Director at PHL Diversity, a business development division of the Philadelphia Convention and Bureaus. As Executive Director, Greg is responsible for developing and implementing plans, strategies, and initiatives specifically designed to raise Philadelphia's image as a diverse, multicultural destination. Greg is a longtime tourism and hospitality professional. He's a native Philadelphian with a passion for his work and dedicated to giving back to the next generation of hospitality leaders. As a member of many associations, Greg has also produced the 2016, 2019, and 2020 Diversity and Inclusion Conference, and currently serves as the chair for the City of Philadelphia's Complete Count Committee, LGBTQ and Subcommittee. Here's a short video to welcome our first panelist, Greg DeShields.
We are PHL Diversity. We are part of the Philadelphia Convention and Visitors Bureau.
We are patrons of Philadelphia's vibrant, diverse communities.
We are 30-plus years of working hand-in-hand with ethnic chambers and civic associations throughout the city.
We are facilitators who leverage our deeply rooted community relationships to fortify your next meeting or convention.
We do this by serving as a connector between your organization, local businesses, and key stakeholders.
We are attendance boosters, panel curators, and sponsorship brokers.
We ensure your event includes suppliers, exhibitors, and knowledge experts who share optics with the audience you're looking to attract.
Like them. Or them.
We are 21st century hosts and educators whose active participation in local multicultural communities enables us to make your event the most comprehensive,
the most meaningful,
and the most successful yet. Because if anyone's up for the challenge of achieving inclusion in the hospitality industry,
it's frankly Philadelphia.
We are
PHL Diversity.
Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to join you today, and I would like to start off by thanking Alyssa, the folks from site SoCal, and of course Tammy, our moderator, for allowing me to share some insights with your group today. So yes, my name is Greg DeShields. I'm the Executive Director at PHL Diversity. You know, in any conversation that you have as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's really good for everyone to at least land in the same space. So let's begin with just some basic definitions to really understand what we mean when we say diversity, equity, and inclusion. So diversity is all about the ways that we differ, whether it's green, blue, purple, whatever you want to call it. It's all the beauty of the uniqueness that we bring. That is what is the value of diversity. As it relates to fair treatment, the equity item really stands at the top. And equity has really become much more of a focused discussion following diversity because it really allows you to address the issue around access for opportunity, and most importantly, eliminating barriers to prevent full participation. You know, as it relates to diversity, once you released and made all access available, you can really begin to grab hold of the full effect of equity. And then of course, inclusion. Inclusion really allows you to enhance whatever that existing idea is to make it better. So the language today is really about being as diverse, as equitable as possible, and most important, providing as much inclusion as possible. But once you go beyond that, you really need to look at some of the fundamentals of your organization and how you can address those issues. So I want to take you through a quick summary of some of the fundamentals. So once you've really defined for yourself what diversity, equity, and inclusion is, this is the basic model, the fundamentals that you need to investigate. Governance, you want to look at that board of directors, those people who have the overall oversight of the organization, to see what is it that needs to be established in terms of the ultimate governance of the organization that can lead any DEI efforts. And then of course, leadership, whoever your executive director or your president or whatever the executive leadership of the organization, they should certainly be getting strong direction from those who have governance and ultimately fiduciary responsibility for the organization, and prioritize that in terms of how that individual leads the organization. So the next phase, as it relates to fundamentals, really centers upon your service planning, your service delivery. It really is about the programming that you do. How have you created the ability for there to be opportunities for various individuals to be involved because of some of the more structured opportunities around engagement around diverse communities. It's also about outreach. How have you structured your organization to connect and communicate with a variety of different communities? You know, that's one of the things I think that's most exciting about the work that we do at PHL Diversity, that we have that ability to reach out to a variety of different organizations. And quite frankly, it helps to educate each time we get even that much more involved. Next, please. So staffing and recruitment and retention of your personnel, I mean, that is really, key. You want to build a culture of where people feel as though they belong, that they can participate, that they can be 100% involved with your organization, and feel that the commitment around diversity and inclusion is not just from the top, but it's in the DNA of your organization. I love this one, the conversation around supplier diversity. I think as we look at all the different fundamentals that you could address in an organization to try and figure out how can we make an impact, I think the most important one to begin with is to simply look at how are we spending our money? How are we distributing that economic activity around the work that we do, and how we can engage various diverse communities. So really look at the opportunity to engage with whether you focus on diverse, multicultural women businesses, but where's your spend? What are the procurement strategies that you've established for your organization? These fundamentals ultimately make a huge difference in how you make a strong statement about your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you, Greg. I thank you so much. I really appreciate that insightful information. And you really laid the groundwork for today's discussion. I think it's always important that we talk about just the fundamentals that can help us guide through what is sometimes a very difficult conversation for us to help. And I know you talked a lot about building a culture and how we can embrace the commitment to DEI. So thank you for sharing that information with us. Now I'd like to invite our next panelist, Zoe Moore, who's also going to bring some additional insights on the critical importance of DEI in the special events industry. Zoe is the founder of LB Alliance, Event Resource. She has also been on a mission since 2016 to advocate, promote, and support underrepresented professionals in the meetings, events, and tourism industry. As an event resource broker, Zoe sought to improve supplier diversity by amplifying the need for dialogue and action towards DEI. Recently, Zoe has shifted her focus from broker into an exclusive event strategist and consultant. Her clients are industry leaders and decision makers interested in implementing DEI committees, policies, and strategies. She is currently the co-chair for Meeting Professionals International, Global Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee. She's also a contributing writer for Meetings Today and a brand ambassador for the African Tourism Board. Welcome, Zoe.
Hello. Good afternoon here. It's Hurricane Sally coming through here on the East Coast in Marietta. I'm so excited to be with all of you, and I echo what Greg said. Thank you, Alyssa, Sierra, Site, Tammy, for this opportunity to connect with site members. I've seen the organization and I can't wait to do this in person. And so a part of this conversation, as you heard, I have been on a mission since 2016. And that passion comes from representing underrepresented professionals, because I am one. Coming out of the Army after 12 years, I entered into the meetings and events industry trying to learn, but had challenges of securing a job and getting opportunities. And so it leads me to this conversation now about the critical importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are so many opportunities that were passed up because I couldn't apply for, different positions. I didn't have the experience, or people just assume I didn't have the experience. And so prioritization of DEI, or the critical importance, it's the title that Greg and I wrote for meetings today. We are co-authors, and prioritization of DEI must not be an afterthought to your core business strategy. It can't be ancillary to the overall business plan. It really has to be core to the fabric and how you do business. So as we project the future of our industry, project budgets, and pursue certifications, I've decided to kind of use a framework that you all may be familiar with, and that is the CITP, right? To my understanding, it's a fairly new designation, and I love acronyms. So if you know me, I'm an acronym queen, and part of that means I use mnemonics to help me remember things, and I want to help you remember this information. It's a lot of information, and I want to use what we call the Cadazo method. It's a new method that I'm forming with a few ladies for Cadazo, and using mnemonics will help you remember different things. So CITP, C stands for certified, but today we're going to change the meaning of that to cultural competence. As travel professionals that are going all over the world and helping clients identify where they want to go for their business meetings or just to enjoy remote locations, having cultural competence is getting to know the local culture, embracing their customs and traditions. And so willingness to have knowledge and not expect anyone to assimilate to any European culture or westernized culture, but to truly dive into the local culture. And so I of CITP stands for incentive, but today it means inclusion and introspection. And in short, I typically take words like introspection, which means this work begins with you. You have to do the personal work. Greg can focus on the overview and the professional side, which is truly important. But if you don't do the personal work, if you don't look within, then we won't move the needle and we won't move the conversation forward. And so I have a thing that I want to put on a t-shirt one day. So if there's any t-shirt makers that you know, I'm going to write inclusion across the t-shirt. And I want you to think about, what does inclusion begin with? It begins with the letter I, which means you. So do the work. So going along with the acronym, T stands for travel. But today we're going to focus on, let's say, travel beyond tolerance. Key to travel beyond tolerance, like cultural competency, is you're not going to other locations or destinations and doing business with different preferred vendors or different providers and just tolerating them or tolerating the culture. For me, when I hear tolerate pain or enduring something. Instead of enduring people or tolerating them, let's embrace and engage and be empowered by different cultures and customs. And lastly, P, which stands for professional. We all are professionals, and part of our job is working with preferred vendors. And Greg mentioned earlier about supplier diversity. One of the things about supplier diversity that we have to be aware of is we have preferred vendors lists. And if we only default to our affinity bias, only associating with people who look like us, think like us, and not having diversity, we won't expand that preferred vendors list. So let's all do the work, both professionally and personally, to expand our preferred vendors list. So there's the acronym CITP for you. And as you take your exams, your 80 questions, and you pass that exam, I want you to also remember this acronym. So like I said, I'm an acronym queen, and this slide has a whole bunch of words on it, right? But Robert Kiyosaki's rules talks about having the 10-20-30 rule. It's supposed to be, like 10 slides, 20 minutes, and 30-point font. This slide is none of that, but I'm going to go through it really quickly. And it's just another way to remember how to be more diverse and inclusive as we do this work as professionals. So monolithic stereotypes. A monolith is a column or a rock, and stereotypes, we all know what that is. And we have to get beyond our limited thinking when we're describing groups of people. No group of people are a monolith. Not everyone in any particular group are the same. All women aren't the same. All men aren't the same. All people of different countries are not the same. So go beyond your limited beliefs. O stands for own your fragility and sit with your discomfort. As we have this conversation, I think Tammy mentioned, when we're engaged in this dialogue, you may hear a lot of terms that you disagree with. It may feel political, it may feel tense, but you have to sit with that discomfort and own it so that you can actually do the work and move through it, right? T, teach and don't tackle. What that means is you're learning, you'll learn a lot of good stuff and you'll have a lot of aha moments. And there'll be people who are at their different points of the journey than you. Part of this teaching is that you're willing to remember and reflect on your own journey. So don't tackle someone for what they don't know. Let's share in this wealth of knowledge that's out there as we grow and explore this different dialogue. T, inclusion begins with I. So again, remember my t-shirt, and when it's on my website, please come back and select and purchase that t-shirt. Inclusion begins with I. This work starts with you. Do not let someone else's unwillingness or what your company is or is not doing slow you down in doing the work. Start with yourself. Like I said, introspection. V is value add and not culture fit. That again ties into cultural competence, right? Part of the designation that I mentioned earlier. The value add is identifying that people bring value to your company, to your event. There are studies that show that when diversity is a core part of how you do business, you increase productivity and efficiency in your business. So don't expect people to fit into your culture. Recognize that they are a value add to what you're doing. A is accountability. You'll hear this word again and many times when we talk about assessments, when we talk about showing the receipts is a term that I like to use. If you're going to commit to this work, be accountable to it and be transparent. When you're telling people as you make this journey, you may not always hit the mark. Be transparent about what your goals are and the work that you're doing to get there. So accountability is also a part of the pledge, something you'll hear about later. T, another T, treat others as they want to be treated. I know that may not be the same phrase that your grandmother told you about treating others as you want to be treated. But remember, we need to get to know each other. We need to embrace our differences, diversity, as Greg defined it, as equity and inclusion. In order to get to know each other, we have to treat others as they want to be treated. That's because you're getting to know what they eat and what they listen to and how they do business so that we can collaborate and again, produce more efficiently and effectively. And lastly, E, we have to engage to evolve. If we default to our affinity bias and only do business, our preferred vendors list, our partners, our suppliers, and whatever, if they only look like us, do business like us, we'll produce the same stagnant type of events, go to the same stagnant locations, and not have any authentic experience. So we have to engage, again, sitting with your discomfort in things that are different. That's how we evolve. So using your theme, using the site theme, let's reflect on motivate, and let's stay motivated to continue to do the work.
Thank you, Zoe. That was some amazing information. And I too am an acronym person, so I appreciate the way you were able to actually just take that, what can sometimes be some pretty dense information and condense it down to where our audience can use it. And I appreciate both the leadership of you and Greg and the guidance that you are giving to this industry to help us tackle this important topic and provide some core business strategies and some concrete ways of how individuals and companies can take on this initiative. And I think we've all talked this morning that, DEI is not something that you can just discuss, that you can read an article about, and then you can put it on a shelf. It has to be a way of life. It has to be a way of doing business. We all have to embrace this important subject in order for it to become a part of a conversations in the workplace rather than a confrontation. So speaking of dialogue in the workforce, we want to hear from our audience. And the best way to do that is please make sure that you're putting all of your questions in the Q&A function so we can take those questions from you. And now what we'd like to do is hear from you by taking a quick poll. We want to get some insight from what is happening out there. So our very first question, we'd like to get on the screen and we're going to read through that. And if you can just answer a yes or no in the chat function for us, that will help us. But does your organization have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee or best practices statement right now? So take a few minutes and just tell us what you're thinking in the chat. And then we're going to dive into some questions from our audience. So I see lots of responses. Thank you. So that's great information. It actually looks like quite a few do have organizations that have a current DEI program. And there's others that don't, but I see that several people are actually developing them now. That's great. And what we want to make sure that that happens is that, we don't just develop this program, we hire a DEI, consultant or director, and then they sit in their office. As both Greg and Zoe have mentioned, we have to tackle these tough conversations and actually do the work. And today is really about helping provide what some of those resources can be. So we actually got a couple of questions that came in from the audience members, and we'd like to take some time and go through those. So Zoe, I'm actually going to ask you our first question. And if you can help us, at a time where inclusion and diversity are at the forefront of our daily lives, how would you suggest we can hold those at the top accountable to pushing forward in a satisfactory way?
Well, thank you, Tammy, for that question, and whoever in the audience asked it. It really starts exactly what we talk about DEI plan being a part of your core business strategy. And a lot of us practitioners don't like to say that you need the business case, but the business case is very important as you can begin to show people how to get to their goals and how that ties into their overall business. So in organizations, one of the things that you'll see in an article that Greg and I will be releasing soon in meetings today is that membership engagement is something that a lot of organizations are looking for. Or in your companies, you're looking for more clients. DEI ties directly into that. And so you hold them accountable by showing them how it ties into their overall business strategy.
Wonderful. I agree. And I think accountability is a big part of it because it has to be actionable, has to be measurable.
Mm-hmm.
We have to begin to hold people accountable so we're not just having, discussions, but we're actually doing the work.
Absolutely.
Greg, this is actually another question that came in from one of our audience members. So if you can take the lead on answering this question for us, that would be great. So what are companies doing to meld DEI into their meetings? And how can we create an inclusive event experience without seeming contrived or forced? And this is a good one because I know a lot of companies are really struggling with this right now.
So I think the important thing is to realize that there's a beginning to this. You don't have a meeting and then all of a sudden try and address those issues. And I want to take a step back and just say that, to approach DEI in any kind of a successful approach is, first defining it for yourself, but then making a commitment as an organization, which is why through the fundamentals, you talk about governance. You do have to become deliberate and you have to be very definitive in terms of how you want to approach it as an organization. When we started PHL Diversity, our focus was on the Black community. Our focus was to support Black businesses, to support Philadelphia as a Black destination. And as we built a best practice and a strong, deep-rooted commitment around embracing all diverse communities, we added the Asian, we added the Native American, LGBT, Hispanic communities. So I think you have to be grounded in a culture that is committed to this. And as it relates to your meetings, you want to think through in terms of producing a meeting, what are the guidelines or what are the parameters or what are the policies? What is the position that we have? What have we stated about our meeting? Any meeting should certainly have an inclusive theme to it, that people are able to contribute, that people can certainly bypass any barriers that may exist. And the culture of someone who is producing a meeting will influence the producer of or the actual participant or executor of the meeting itself. So I think it really begins with you and the level of commitment that you have to it, looking through your culture of your organization and your governance team or your leadership team, and then apply that to the best practices of how you want to produce a meeting, so that it's not something that you are addressing in the actual day of, but throughout the overall planning of a meeting. And I gotta be honest, for someone who planned a diversity and inclusion conference, for a year out, we worked with focus groups who helped us understand the true nuances associated with how you create a diversity and inclusion conference that is accessible and engaging for all. So it is about how you start.
And I appreciate that, Greg. And sometimes what I've heard from my colleagues is, where do I start? What do I do? I think that they have the best of intentions and they want to make sure that they are being inclusive, but they really just don't know how. So what are some tips that you can just give to get people who are interested in this? How do they get started? How do we make it easy?
So the first thing I would say is, don't present yourself as the DEI expert. Realize that there are a number of experts who can approach this from a variety of different perspectives. You can certainly raise your consciousness that this is something that we want to do, but this is not something that you say, oh, we're going to be diverse today. There is a body of knowledge. There is a level of sophistication, professionalism that's associated with it. So the first thing I would say is certainly bring to your network, bring to your group a knowledge expert in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion. They can help you with some of the fundamentals that you need to know. Amongst the very beginning phases of this process is to do an assessment of your organization. You'll probably find that there are aspects of your organization that, quite frankly, are structured so that you are not diverse and inclusive. And those are things that it's almost like taking a combustible engine and putting a hybrid battery in it. There are pieces of your business that are just going to need to change. But you don't know what you don't know until you start to peel it back and you learn about that. And once you learn about that through someone who can be objective, because you may look at it and say, it's not that bad. No, it is that bad. And you need someone who'll tell you it's that bad. And then they can help you through what are the more feasible things for you to accomplish. But I would say, don't position yourself to be the expert. Rely on knowledge experts who can come in either as a consultant to manage you through that process and leave you with best practices and strategies to move forward, or embed them within your organization. But realize that you are making a change to a culture, and it will need to take you through various phases that would start with doing an assessment of where you are as an organization.
Outstanding. Zoe, you want to add anything there before we go on to our next question? I think that's great information.
Absolutely. Greg, of course, because we talk all the time, and he hit the nail right on the head. It begins with the assessment. People want to run, head first, dive head first, and get to the results. And there's a quote that I use all the time: when inclusion is the behavior, diversity will be the result. So first, before trying to get the result, trying to get to easy, let's talk about what we're doing daily. What is our behavior? What is our business practice? What are our code of conduct? What is our principles of professionalism? Let's look into that. And then we can start talking about what results we're trying to work towards.
Absolutely. And I think what both of you all have mentioned is just acknowledging it. Just saying, I don't know. This is something that I want to do, but I don't know how to do it. How can I find the resources? But just acknowledging that it's something that we should all do. And I see in the chat, people are asking questions. We're going to today provide some of those resources for you. So you do have those resources and those lists that you can go to get that kind of information. So let's do another quick poll. Let's see what our audience is saying. I think it's the next poll question. Let's see. Yeah. Did your organization issue a statement surrounding the recent Black Lives Matter movement? So let's hear from our audience if your companies or organization provided a statement. Yes, I see lots of yeses coming in. Excellent. That's good. So what, again, this is telling us is that people are acknowledging that it's important, that it's a discussion that we should all be a part of, and that we recognize what DEI means not only to the world in which we live in, the special events industry, but to our daily lives. This is not something that we're going to, go through a phase, if you will, part of our daily lives that we need to implement. So I'm excited to see that lots of our audience members, their companies did issue. So Zoe, we actually got a question from another audience member, so we're going to come back to you and ask you the next question if we can.
Is there any Jeopardy music?
I don't think so. I don't know if DJ is still there with our Jeopardy music, but let's see. So our next question for you. How do we create a DEI outside suppliers, clients?
How do you create I'm assuming how you influence?
Yes.
How do you influence? That's a really good question. So, Greg spoke about it. We talk a lot about kind of what we produce are the events, right? And that is creating diversity, equity, inclusion for our clients or the participants or the attendees of an event. But if we go all the way back to who we're hiring, who we're doing business with, it begins in like your RFP. It begins in your own code of conduct. If you say in your RFP, let's go with that, right? And you have provisions in your RFP that are asking venues and vendors and suppliers how they're approaching DEI. Do you have a DEI policy in place? What is the demographics of your business or your company? Or ask these questions, and it begins to motivate other people to introspect, to do the work they need to do, to start knowing how important this is to you, because you have the buying power. And so if you're going to a location and you want to give your client an authentic experience, you need to use local businesses that are authentically represent the locale that you're going to or the location you're going to. Mm-hmm. So if you're encouraging, different venues, different partners that you're working with to make sure they're hiring and have fair practices, it begins to impact the whole partner ecosystem. So I always say that the personal work begins with us. We have to hold the standard and be consistent in our dialogue in how we do business. And then I'm optimistic that our entire industry will start to take hold of this and see not only the moral impact that it's making, but that it does make the business impact. And there is an ROI. There's a return on investing in this work. And so that I think that's how you hold people accountable, is that you practice it in your processes, in your procedures, in your operations. And like Greg mentioned, creating that culture, developing that culture of belonging, where it helps to optimize the people that you're working with because they feel included, because they feel like they belong. That's when they speak up, and that's when they bring their whole authentic and their best selves.
Yeah, you said a word that I really like, and it's authentic. And I think that that's what we want people to be in this space, to be truly who they are, because people can see through it when you're not. When you're putting on an event and you feel like, well, I think this is the food that people want to eat because of the cultural impact. You have to do your homework like you would any other event. And to Greg's point earlier, make sure that you bring on those vendors and suppliers that know the market that you're producing an event for. So to be authentic, I appreciate that. Greg, anything you want to add about how do we influence?
So the one thing I would just say as you approach all of this is that you don't fix DE and I. And there are a number of organizations that have approached the DEI as there's something wrong in an organization, and they can take this one moment, this one opportunity to fix it and move on. It really has to become embedded in terms of the culture of the organization. There's a phrase that we constantly say that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And a lot of the things that we've talked about, even as we talk about issue of supplier diversity, I mean, realize this is a long haul. And certainly to be able to secure more diverse vendors is good for your organization. But if you think through it long term, there are a lot of ways of which that relationship will evolve. Some of it might be in terms of helping to gain greater market share for you, to engage you with customers that you perhaps did not know, to evolve new products and services. So the idea of engaging in some of these suggestions that we are bringing to you are not meant to fix something and say, I have a supplier diversity program, but what does that look like in the long span of your organization and their organization? The more successful they are, the more they can contribute to you to be successful. I think this idea of authenticity, the sincerity, the commitment has to be there. It can't be something that you embark upon and 6 months later there's a question about, why aren't we continuing to do that? Both Zoe and I have noticed throughout the pandemic and the last 6 and 7 months, there's a clear indication of who's in it for what reason. And the reality of it is that, yes, we're all struggling with reduced budgets, but in some cases we're keeping the lights on because we only have half the lights on. You don't need to eliminate your DEI division. You might adjust it proportionally as you would to any other organization. So it's just being as authentically and as sincere committed to this, and how it becomes a pivotal part of your business and your organization success is crucial to this conversation. And that's how it ultimately becomes good for all, because you understand the business benefit that it creates for everyone, and the long-term approach to this will raise all boats.
Well, I can tell how passionate you guys both are about this subject, and I appreciate it. And it leads me into one of my last questions for you, Greg, that came from our audience. And what is the best way for people to handle what can sometimes be insensitive situations that have happened at events? What's the best way to handle that?
Right. And, I take that back to, what was the code of conduct that you developed from the very beginning? And to be honest with you, especially like in the case of producing 3 diversity and inclusion conferences, there were a lot of considerations we had. So if we are producing a conference and the objective is to make it as inclusive for people who may be blind, or people who may not be able to hear, how have we adapted to the execution of the conference so they can participate 100%? So it goes back to that whole idea of how did you plan, how did you structure? Especially when you do a D&I conference, there's a code of conduct that is embedded in every aspect of how you promote the conference. It doesn't mean that people aren't going to do something, but you have stated a position in terms of what is tolerated and what is not. And I think beyond the idea of creating a code of conduct is that you articulate clearly to individuals what the behavior is expected during the course of your conference. I think not doing that shows a lack of structure or commitment on your part to ensure that you've created a safe environment. How many times have we gone to a meeting and people say it's a safe place, it's a safe place, but what was done to even make it a safe place? I mean, it's a great phrase to throw out there, but really, what did you do, right? I didn't see anything change as I walked into the room. So I think it's about being much more focused around what is it that you're producing and what is it what you're trying to achieve. And you don't get the results when it happens. The results are when you put through the due diligence and the work and the front end to produce something that is ultimately what you are trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Zoe, please add.
Yeah, no, I want to know if anybody remembers what O means in motivate, and this comes back to the owning your fragility and sitting with that discomfort. You have these conversations ahead of the event, and that means to be proactive. If this behavior were to happen, what is going to be our response? Mm-hmm. Let's not be reactive, and then it becomes a bigger incident than it needed to be. But define those terms, like Greg mentioned, define them first up front, have those conversations, and then set that code of conduct out there so that everybody has those expectations and consequences of their actions.
And as industry experts and event producers, it's our responsibility to help guide and coach and instruct our clients to do that. That's what they've hired us to do. You know, not only just produce a great event, but to consult with them on the best way to execute it and to make sure they have a good audience experience. So I would just, implore, everyone in our audience today to really take that on as part of your scope of work as we're producing events out there, because I think that's how we become, better value add to our clients.
And Tammy, I hate to interrupt you, but then that concept, the idea is once you've created that code of conduct, so when you're meeting with the AV company, when you're talking with some of the environmental services folks, when you are connecting with some of the various suppliers of different products and services during the conference, you can share your code of conduct with them. So as they interface with your production, they know what you expect for their workers or their service providers. So that's why that code of conduct is so important. You use that as even part of your negotiation with the contract with some of the suppliers so that they know what your expectations are. So you reduce that probability of something happening which should not.
Thank you. Well, I know that we want to share some best practices and resources, but before we do that, I want to ask for each of you just to give some final comments around this important topic. So I'd let you go first.
Oh, I could talk for another hour. No, just overall, like looking through this theme that you have when we talk about motivate and whatever helps you to know that this work is a daily effort. This is not something that you learn overnight. You're going to wrestle with different ideas, but take what's going on in you personally and combine that with what you have to do professionally, because we aren't robots. We don't leave home and take the chip out, right, and go to work and become a new person. So we have to see how that intersection, how we're being impacted, how that impacts everyone else that's around us, vendors, suppliers, our staff. And so creating that culture in the workplace, just like you do in your home or in your personal life, will begin to then influence everything that you do. So let's not forget the personal aspect of doing this work. And it is a journey. So I want to come from that perspective, just the human side of all of this, that getting to know each of you has to do with the work that we do on the personal side.
Thank you. Greg, last comments?
Sure. So the one last thing I would love to say, and if some of you haven't really soaked up the backdrop of my screen, it's Mother Bethel Church here in Philadelphia, and it's a very historic African-American church. And I think back to your incredible DJ when we were in the waiting room for this event, and there was a very important song that was played. It was James Brown. It was "I'm Black and I'm Proud." So I have to implore you to be also someone who embraces the fact of the Black Lives Matter movement that is happening. It is for real. It is not a moment. And as we talk about issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, of course, African Americans have been a part of that conversation, but there is a clear discussion around issues of social justice and racism as it relates to the African American community. And I'm not asking you to be someone who's political or someone who wants to take a position on it, but you have to be acknowledging of the reality that of the four top things facing our country, what is facing the African American community is extremely important. So I would encourage you to be as informed as you can possibly be. Realize that supporting Black Matters is not a political statement. It's just to me that we can create an opportunity for all to have access and that we can reduce barriers. That is not something that you should step away from. That should be something that you should lean into and realize it is making a difference in people's lives and it is making a difference in our country. And as individuals who are in the meeting and the convention business, it is good for our business. So I just encourage you to not step away from that, but lean into it where you can.
Yes, thank you. So let's share some best practices that both Zoe and Greg have put together with our audience, because we've had quite a few people say, what are these resources and tools? So Greg or Zoe, I know you provided these, so please share with us some information today.
Zoe, first.
Go ahead, Greg.
No, you go first.
Oh, I was just gonna keep saying it over and over again. Go check out Meetings Today. I have had the pleasure of co-authoring with Greg, and we talk about all these issues. We're on our 4th article, which will be coming out soon, but those 3 will get you started. And it's something that I say, read daily, add to your vocabulary, learn how to articulate these different experiences that you're having in the work that needs to be done. So I'll stop there and let Greg touch on the other 3.
Sure. So listen, this is probably the most important takeaway that you will get today. Diversity Best Practices. They publish a newsletter monthly with incredibly insightful perspectives on issues of diversity and inclusion. They give a calendar of all of the cultural celebrations that take place. They have a variety of research studies. They help you to know who are the who in what community. So I encourage you to write this down, pay whatever the subscription is. When you get that, it's probably the one email that you would actually look forward to reading every single month. The second is a SHRM diversity, or I should say the SHRM Inclusion Conference. It's in Philadelphia this year. It is virtual, but it's one of the best gatherings of DEI practitioners and HR professionals around the discussion of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if you want to expand your network by industry perspective, it's one of the best places to go. And then the last one I'll point out to you is, I think, you will evolve in this, and at some point in time, you will want to be a credentialed knowledge expert in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I would strongly encourage you to think about some form of certification. There are certifications for even the basic practitioner, but if you are exploring the idea of engaging DEI as a part of your strategy, there should be a credentialed somebody somewhere. We've talked about the consultant, but how about you yourself? Take that as one of your first steps to show your commitment to not just execute it, but to have a voice in terms of how we evolve this as a field. Thanks.
Thank you. Excellent, excellent. Can we all give a big virtual round of applause to our panelists today, Greg DeShields and Zoe Moore. We so appreciate your being here with us today and imparting both your wisdom and knowledge around this important topic. I like to say that it takes deliberate practice to master a skill, and talking about diversity, inclusion is no different. It was important today that we share information with you so we can all be a part of our daily lives and not just a hot topic. So thank you again for the discussion, and I turn it back over to Alyssa.
I think we are in Southern California. Our region in and of itself is a very diverse region. So I think sometimes we can think, oh, we're inclusive. Everybody is welcome, of course. But we really need to take it beyond that and make sure that we are reaching out to those who maybe don't know that or don't feel as welcomed, and we just don't see it, we don't know it. It's so easy to, when people volunteer, accept that, but are we really taking that step further and going beyond that? I loved Zoe's phrase, when inclusion is behavior, diversity will be the result. And we certainly want to spearhead that in our industry here. We're gonna get a lot more into that in a little bit. We have our keynote coming up, but beforehand, I'd like to turn this over to our VP of Community Outreach, Lisa Duarte, to introduce our charity for this afternoon. Lisa.
Hello, everyone. So I just want to take this opportunity to highlight a really amazing organization that was recently introduced to me that's based in Los Angeles, and it's called A Place Called Home. And I actually have a video that I just want to play for everyone to give us a better understanding of the amazing work that they do. So enjoy.
The Rodney King riots, what it did to South Central is it made everybody more scared.
The young people didn't have a place to go. They were in need of help, and they were in need of people taking an interest in them.
I really wanted to start a place for all the children to go to be safe, to feel safe.
That's what A Place Called Home is.
It was quite a place.
Whatever you did outside of A Place Called Home was kind of left at the gate.
After I started going, I would tell my cousins, they would start coming, and we would be this gang of children just walking down the street.
There was 12 of them. But the 12 turned into 100, which turned into 200, turned into 300 very quickly.
The past 25 years has been a period of growth for a place called home. We've taken that basic premise of love, safety, and opportunity and built an infrastructure around it that has state-of-the-art equipment and classrooms. We're focused now on vocational training, and then we will give away about $400,000 a year in college scholarships. We've sent hundreds of young people to college to get degrees, and many of them are coming back to this community.
We give them a space to think, a space to create, a space to challenge their own thoughts, and at the very least, tools to navigate the world.
We serve about 250 to 350 fresh meals every day, all made from scratch. Every single thing we do is designed to advance young people's stories towards success, towards capacity to make a difference in their own lives and in the world.
We are living through an upheaval and an awakening, unlike anything most of us have experienced in our lifetimes. Our quality of life and well-being, and that of just about everyone on the planet, has been impacted by a global pandemic that not only threatens our health, but has illuminated long-standing inequities in terms of resources and safety nets that must be fixed. APCH has adapted to make sure our programs run uninterrupted, and we've added key services for those in most need in South Central. Our staff is innovating every day. We have 38 classes online in the arts, homework help, athletics, nutrition, job readiness, and mental health counseling. And our Family Resource Depot is up and running and providing fresh groceries and produce, some from our very own gardens, and paper products to hundreds of families throughout South LA each week.
Today, 200 families are going to have food delivered to their homes, but next week, the organization says they'll probably have to take care of at least 600 families.
But our work doesn't end there.
Right now, we have to get to the investigation into the death of George Floyd.
George Floyd's murder was a call to action. APCH supports the Black Lives Matter movement, and we are committed to deepening our work on behalf of racial and social justice and strengthening our direct support to young people of color who have suffered the negative consequences of systemic racism, and all young people who struggle with lack of basic resources and equal access to education and opportunity.
The DNA of this place, the love and the safety that we started with, are still at the core. But we have hundreds of young people and families who are on a waiting list, and they have just as much need as those who are in.
So the challenge is how to serve more and more children.
My hope is that it keeps growing because it's making a difference. This place is like a portal to get you to something else that's beyond your wildest dreams.
So I highly encourage everyone to please visit their website. I placed the link in the chat box, so sorry about that. And if you're able to donate, please do. They're not able to do the programs that they offer without the funding that they receive locally. So please take a look at them. They have amazing work and amazing programs that they offer the children in South LA. So thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you, Lisa. And just reiterate, the link is in the chat box here to donate to a place called home if you are able. We can't wait to get our hands dirty as a board once we are able to get back out there when it is safe to do so. What a wonderful organization we'll continue to support throughout our year this year. I am moving into a really exciting keynote speaker, so please hang with us. We will go a little bit over 3 o'clock, but we have some exciting announcements towards the end. Please stay with us. Big thank you quickly to Innovative Entertainment for introducing us to Sekou Andrews. Sekou is the CEO of Sekou World, Inc., and one of the most successful spoken word poets in the world. On any given day, the school teacher turned artist and entrepreneur who built a 7-figure company on poetry can be found keynoting at a Fortune 500 company, inspiring thousands at a concert, or performing for Barack Obama in Oprah's backyard. His accomplishments include 2 National Poetry Slam Championships, 2 National Poetry Tours, 2 Independent Music Awards, 3 Helen Hayes Awards, the most Just Plain Folks Music Awards in history, the 2020 ABA Entrepreneur of the Year Award, and the first Best Spoken Word Album Grammy nomination for a poet in 30 years. Sekou is the creator of Poetic Voice, a cutting-edge speaking experience that seamlessly fuses inspirational speaking with spoken word, like Hamilton meets Ted. His keynotes are in high demand from global organizations. He has been featured on ABC, CBS, HBO, MTV, and BET, and Forbes has called him a polymath and the de facto poet laureate of corporate America. He also teaches his rockstar secrets to public speakers through his Stage Might TM speaker training system. Sekou does more than inspire us with his story. He inspires us with our story. Please welcome Sekou Andrews.
The first way that we actually gain power through the people is not through all of those differences. It's actually found in unearthing our hidden sources of sameness. It's gaining power through culture by giving power to purpose. Look, we all know the phrase, opposites attract, right? Opposites attract. Now look, for magnets, yes, that still holds true. But for people, not so much. Studies are really proving that wrong, right? Studies are showing that people are actually attracted to sameness, to similar beliefs, to values, to experiences. So that's your opportunity to harness that power and use that. Look, the first step toward building high-performing and diverse and inclusive communities is to attract people based on how you are alike, on sameness, but not sameness on culture or age, all the outward appearances, but same values, same purpose, same mission in the world. We don't have to go any further than your industry. Think about what connects you all to each other. You're not bound by your gender, your political affiliation, or your nationality. No, you are bound by the common purpose of creating connection and fellowship and community. And through that purpose, you share common experiences, right? You share the experience of presenting a destination to a client that will hopefully wow them, right? Or we can get more detailed. You share the experience of ensuring the highest level of service for every incentive trip, right? All right, I get it. You're like, let's keep it real. You share the experience of searching for an outlet at the terminal gate, right? Headed to a site visit while putting out travel flyers and tracking limo drivers and catering to hosted buyers and wondering if we sold enough 10 by 10s by suppliers, up late nights, brains all wired, trying to recall which VIP requires a special Norwegian hair dryer and which sponsor's hotel room must be no higher than the 13th floor. There is no 13th floor! And the request for a burgundy limo with white wall tires? Are you kidding me? White wall tires? Fine. Well, I tell you what, the budget just got tighter. Wait, is PowerPoint Keynote or Prezi Desire? Is headset lavalier or handheld wired? Wait, where are all those volunteers I hired? Wait, so nobody proofread this promo flyer. Wait, why am I being called a liar? Just because Beyonce asked for a diet tab and a bald eagle on her rider? Well, the bald eagle is on its way because I'm that hot under fire, but who the hell still drinks Tab? It's like people conspire to make me endlessly perspire because I'm not normally a crier, but oh my God, I'm so tired. I almost want to be fired. I get it. Calm down. Listen, I'm going to connect with you here for a moment, okay? It is said that being an event or an incentive travel or a meeting professional of any kind is one of the top 5 most stressful jobs in the country. Y'all made the top 5. I think y'all beat like coal miners and stuff. That's crazy. And the moment that you knew that statement to be true was when someone made the life-threatening mistake of calling you a party planner and you almost shanked them, right? You was putting the tape on the thing. You was like, I'm going for the liver. You almost shanked. Party planner? I'm sorry. Party planner? Look, I just masterfully orchestrated the $5 million global sales retreat of a multinational Fortune 100 for 1,000 attendees in 7 different languages over a 5-day event. And there was not a clown, a party hat, or a balloon animal in sight. You better get out of here with this party planner crap. I get it. Trying to get the world to accept how you identify and what you do uniquely, and even what to call you is hard. And if anybody can understand that, it's your boy. Because just like you had a hard time stopping people from calling you a party planner instead of an incentive travel professional, yeah, I had a hard time. I had a much harder time, in fact, stopping people from introducing me on stage, despite my bio and intro materials, as a rock poetry artist or #1 street poet. I'm sorry, did you say street poet? As if you just picked me up off the street and cleaned me up and was like, hey, kid, come on in here and do this keynote. Seriously? Instead of calling me a poetic voice, which is this new style of speaking that seamlessly blends inspirational speaking with spoken word poetry. But here's the thing, that's not the only reason why we are two sides of the same coin. It's also because we are in the same business. Not the live events business, the inspiration business. And we know that because the gathering, it's been shut down, right? The live event has been, unfortunately, canceled. But the live event was simply the vehicle for delivering the inspiration. The gathering was going to bring your people together for the purpose of inspiring togetherness in your people. And that is not canceled. That is needed now more than ever during this pandemic. And that is what bonds us to each other. That is our sameness that lies beneath all of the various forms of our otherness. And so that is the question. How do you unearth that in an organization?
Incredible. A virtual round of applause to Sekou Andrews. That was just so impactful. I laughed, I had goosebumps. I can't wait to share that recording. It will be up on social media, but for a limited time only. So power to the voice. We have an incredible opportunity in the roles that we play in our organizations and in our events that we plan. Having that voice is so important. And I hope that we have all learned a lot today through all of the different speakers that we have heard from. Site SoCal, who you can see the board of directors behind me, stands with all of this messages. Black Lives Matter to Site SoCal, to Site Southern California, to Site Global. We are participating in a pledge that will be posted in the chat box here. And we pledge to continue this conversation, but not only continue the conversation, to keep this dialogue going and to do measurable change. We acknowledge that there is work to be done. And we want to pledge to assess the landscape of our organization, have accountability, take action in seeking consulting, expand our preferred vendor lists, and contract with as many minority organizations as we can in Southern California here. Please join me and our Southern California Board of Directors in joining this pledge, signing this. It will be posted on social media. So important. Another step we are taking as a board here is the introduction of a new board position for the 2021 term, and that is a Director of Inclusion. This person will serve as our guiding light to ensure that everything that we have learned and continue to grow in is with the thoughts of everybody, inclusion and equity, to make sure that we are being as warm and hospitable to all types of people in our incredibly diverse region here. Please apply for our board. We would love to have you. As we've heard, we are only as good as everybody that can participate and really help us move forward and create this incredible change. We look forward to 2021. Thank you so much to Tammy, to Zoe, to Greg, and to Sekou for being here with us this afternoon. And of course, thank you to our incredible hosts here at the Pendry San Diego and 5-Star AV. Hey, Mr. DJ and Innovative Entertainment, thank you for being here. We look forward to seeing everybody as soon as we can rejoin together again. Until then, we'll see you all online. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.